Miller Twins 9481 commented, with the Paradox pack, capitalized Paradox, forgot to capitalize pack, we'll work on it, out, will you update your ranking to include the new characters? Yes, I will be updating the ranking because that video is slop, absolute slop. I worked kind of hard on it, but it's still slop, so I will be working on a better version of it. And I should say that this is the better version, okay, whatever, I guess I'll do the rules. Rules time. Alright, so, first of all, I lost my progress, so I'm gonna be doing another new save file, which is kind of sad, but I also deleted all my gameplay footage from the previous video, so I kind of need to play the game anyways, so it's kind of like, it's still bad, but it's not like the worst thing in the world. And in other news, we're ditching the number thing, right? The numerical rating, that was kind of dumb. We're just making a tier list in order of characters in the guidebook. So Shovel Knight first, Shuffle Knight is last. Well, technically like Quandary Sage is last, but you know what I mean. Well, I'm gonna do Refracted characters after all of the normal characters, just because I'm gonna be talking about each character pretty much right after I finish a run with them. So it's more convenient to do the Refracted characters when I have the funds to do it, because I'm starting a new save and I won't immediately be able to even get all the Refracted abilities and all that. That's pretty much all you need to know. Quick edit, you should know that I will also be doing the miscellaneous characters from my sequel video, so technically it's like an all-in-one thing. Yeah, so there's this character, you might have heard of. His name is Shovel Knight. Let's just start off by saying that he's a B tier, right? I'm putting him in average tier, or like above average tier, because, you know, more potions and Fatal Chains do more damage. It's simple as that. You generally don't even notice the gimmick of the character. Obviously, he's just like the most generic way to play the game, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Just having a generic vessel is always great, to be honest, for a fun game like Pocket Dungeon. That being said, I got to see some of the new DLC mechanics, which was pretty hype. They got like the little guys from the thing. I don't know if they're in Shovel Knight, like Treasure Trove, but they're in Shovel Knight Dig, which I've only played a little bit of, but in the fireplace they have the guys, so that was cool, and the poison dagger, and in the map they have like the new icons and stuff, so you can see what bosses you're fighting, etc, etc. That's pretty awesome. Also new like mini bosses in the rift areas, and the armor smith is a thing now. That's really cool. You can like upgrade your temporary items so they have more durability, but it costs like money, which is actually really cool. So I just beefed up my poison dagger, which was maybe not a smart financial choice, but so far the DLC seems like somewhat small, but very cool and good content additions, which is hype. Yeah, I'm literally just using the Shovel Knight segment as like a mouthpiece for how I feel about the DLC so far, which I will be doing since it's all the character thoughts are recorded right after I play the character and all that. But yeah, I'm not even that upset about having to do all the characters again, to be honest. It's a little annoying, but hopefully I'll get into the groove of things and all that. So yeah, Shovel Knight is B tier. Next up is Plague Knight, or Spectre Knight, or King Knight. I don't remember. Plague Knight, because technically it goes King Knight, Spectre Knight, Plague Knight in that order, but I don't have them yet, so we're going out of order. Don't worry, you're gonna be fine. Anyways, Plague Knight, I don't know. I feel like I honestly gave him the short end of the stick in my previous video, because he's not that bad, alright? I still think that poison, it can feel a little unsatisfying at times, but at the same time, you do have to be a little bit more mindful of who you're attacking and when, which actually makes it a little bit fun, right? You get that +1 damage without the feeling of just being like kind of overpowered. I think of him a little bit higher than I used to, right? That being said, in terms of the DLC parts that I found a Lost City or whatever. That was cool. They switched up Stranded Ship and the ship place, the propeller place I keep forgetting the name of, which I think is actually a really good balancing decision, because that place is kind of annoying, but it's not difficult, you know what I mean? It's just annoying because of the fan that keeps pushing you to the side. Anyways, for the moment, I would probably say a high B tier or so. Next up is Spectre Knight, because I still don't have King Knight. So I died. So I have King Knight, and I have King Knight before I beat the game with Spectre Knight, so we're doing King Knight now. King Knight's an interesting character for me these days, because on the one hand, kind of boring. I feel like you always know when to use his ability, there's not really that much thought that goes into it. But on the other hand, it's like whenever you're in a boss fight, it's literally just,
what did you... Wait a minute. I'm
King Knight.
Where you going?
But then in average gameplay, it just feels like I'm playing the game normally, except when there's a high damage, high HP enemy, in which case I just walk away and then bash them from as far away as I can muster. And that's the game plan. And I think that's fine, but I don't actually find it that compelling. Therefore, I will unfortunately be giving King Knight a middle-of-the-road B tier, maybe underneath Plague Knight, but they're somewhat equal. Next up actually is Spectre Knight. Okay, this one actually is being recorded like multiple hours after I played the character because I was too lazy to do the recording, but now I'm doing it, alright? So, Spectre Knight is like the inverse of King Knight. Very good at aggressive play in terms of low HP enemies and just general like fodder enemies, but very bad at high HP stuff like the crab guys and bosses, right? Especially bosses, because the way they spawn units, it means you have to be very cautious about your HP amount so that you never get below a certain amount. Because if you get below a certain amount, I mean, you're cooked, right? You're literally dead, depending on the fight. And you just generally have to be more careful about everything playing Spectre Knight. And because of that, I feel like I'm like it kind of slows gameplay down in a way that I find kind of unfun. So I'm putting him also in B tier below King Knight for kind of the opposite reasons of King Knight, actually. So yeah, so far literally everyone's in B tier. I'm pretty sure that will change, I hope. Actually, it will change, because next up on the list is Mole Knight. Ness from like 1 minute in the future here. Did you know that you could burrow into this guy's room as Mole Knight, and only as Mole Knight? That's actually pretty cool. Okay, back to the video. Mole Knight is an extremely mediocre character, in my opinion, because his movement is purely to get you out of an already bad situation, and can almost never be used proactively. To be honest, I do not have much more to say. I will be putting him in C tier. Next up is Treasure Knight. Treasure Knight has always been a favorite character for me for no specific reason. It's such a simple ability, but it's also very helpful, and I feel like I always get the luckiest runs when I use him. He's very fun, he's good against bosses, but he's also good against some normal enemies. You can always put yourself in a better position to do more damage using him, and the animation that he plays when he hits someone above him is like next level satisfying. There's honestly not that much to talk about because it is so simple, but I think it's a simple character done well. And for that, I'm going to give him the first A tier of the video. Next up is, of course, Tinker Knight. Tinker Knight is pretty fun. I love how he uses blocks, and how he is literally the only character that uses blocks in any interesting way. And there's like double the resource management as well, right? You have to manage HP and your mech fuel at the same time. I think that's a really cool balancing act. I think that it's just nice to finally have blocks be an exciting thing instead of just like a random obstacle that's slightly annoying. Besides that, I like that the explosion leaves you at 1 HP, kind of keeps you on your toes, and the 3 HP starting health is also, I think, pretty balanced by the mech in general. It makes for a pretty fun and honestly pretty unique glass cannon experience, at least from my perspective. So I'm gonna also put this guy in A tier. Probably visually I'm going to put him above Treasure Knight, but they're pretty much the same. So next up is 1 second, I actually am going to check literally right now. Next up is Polar Knight. So yeah, Polar Knight. Doing a slight tier list redesign. Alright, first of all, Polar Knight is in B tier. We're moving Shovel Knight down to C tier because I have realized the error of my ways. And Shovel Knight is actually kind of boring because he is the default character. But that does not mean he is a bad character. Polar Knight, in prospect, kind of like Shovel Knight, but a little bit more interesting. I think that freezing foes, I think setting up specific chains to freeze additional enemies can be pretty rewarding and more satisfying than just doing that extra damage like Shovel Knight. and I am putting him a little bit higher than I originally did. Therefore, Polar Knight is going in a B tier now. Congratulations to Polar Knight. Next up is Propeller Knight. Hey, it's Ness from 1 minute in the future here. Propeller Knight is my go-to character for completing the Mona minigame. If you're trying to unlock Mona by getting 100 points in her minigame, try playing Propeller Knight, and you will probably succeed. Okay, back to the video. Polar Knight is kind of boring, but you know who's not boring? Propeller Knight. Propeller Knight is one of my favorite characters. There's just something about his aura, dude. Plus 1000 aura for this individual. I love everything about him, man. He has like my favorite portraits. He has my favorite like idle animation in the hub area in the game. And he's such a vibe. What a cool guy. So that might be influencing me a little bit. Also, his gameplay is obviously extremely fun. Being that powerful, but with like a legitimately pretty big downside is super cool. Because like on the one hand, you're pretty much only aiming for lone foes. You're getting less gems right off the bat, and attacking chains also makes you take double damage. That actually adds up really quickly, you know what I mean? But like, the absolute blasphemy with this character. He scales so hard. It's extremely fun to just try and get that number as big as possible. And because of this, he is the first S tier on the list. Round of applause. That being said, next up is Scrap Knight. I am very fond of this character. I think Scrap Knight has a lot to offer the world. First of all, she can interact with pretty much any item. Just any item, right? Bombs, crystals, enemies, blocks, items, etc. That by itself is game changing. I mean, that lets you make pretty much any chain as big as you want it to be, lets you just get out of jail for free, and all that. Also, increased item durability, which just is such a, it's like the cherry on top. It just makes the game more fun, lets you tamper with items, lets you keep items for boss fights. It's kind of like, I don't know if the character's like too powerful, but they are a very powerful character that is done in a way that is consistently fun. And I think they really embody Pocket Dungeon because their ability is so in tandem with the idea of Pocket Dungeon and like the way it plays. And for that, I'm giving Scrap Knight also an S tier. Congratulations. Next up is, of course, Prism Knight. I think I have a higher opinion of Prism Knight than I used to. That teleport ability, I think is pretty good. Obviously, if it was just the swapping enemies, then it would just be a worse Scrap Knight. And for a little while, I did just think of Prism Knight as a worse Scrap Knight at the beginning of my playthrough. And then I remembered she has the teleport, and I was like, okay, that's a pretty good amount of utility. And now I do find her to be a pretty cool utility character. She's kinda a bit of everything, right? Jack of all trades, because she has those two different things that I think are cool. Not super offensive, but kind of support class, tank class, whatever. Okay, I don't know what I'm saying. But overall, I do think that she is a decently strong character. Now, item review, because I've actually played with some new items that I bought from the DLC. Portal thing, whatever it's called, pretty mediocre. I didn't find it that fun. Maybe I'm just missing something. The explosive jar thing, where when a bomb explodes, you explode or whatever, you counter explode. That's pretty cool. I thought that was like a pretty fun item that's kind of useful. And I like that it copies the attributes of the explosion you got hit by. That being said, Prism Knight, probably, unfortunately, a B tier, but that is, of course, subject to change. Next up is the infamous Puzzle Knight character. Puzzle Knight, I think, falls off later game. Like, later in a run, I think you're not going to be using his ability as much as Prism Knights, right? Because Prism Knight has that teleport that's always useful in boss fights and stuff like that. Puzzle Knight, if you're like me, I feel like you'll eventually kind of forget about it. I think the rotation is cool, not particularly groundbreaking, right? Like, I think it's cool that you can rotate enemies around you, and obviously that has some utility. It also works really well with Fizzle Wand and stuff, which I never thought about that, but like, that has a random kind of decent synergy. Generally, kind of mid. I mean, just because I forget about the ability and I don't think it's as useful late game, I would probably have to put them below Prism Knight, also in a B tier, to be honest with you. So, B tier. Next up is Black Knight. Black Knight is peak. Black Knight, at this point of the tier list, is my favorite character in the entire game. And, you know what's funny, is that I put him in the 15th spot of my tier list in my previous one. And that is crazy, but I truly didn't grasp how good he is once you realize how the buff works. It's so easy to get gem meter, right? Potions, blocks, enemies, anything. And it's so easy to drink potions before you have the damage boost, and then you just get the full damage boost for free for the entire level, pretty much. You know what I mean? If you play your cards right, the entire level is easy once you get the damage buff. Just get a single shield item for bosses, and then the run is pretty much over already, you know what I mean? It's the most secure character for me, in terms of like, after a certain point, you are 100% going to win. It is so good. Also, did you know that drinking the triple chalice counts as a potion? Or whatever? It reset my damage buff. Like, literally right before the Enchantress fight. I don't know what that's about. That was really annoying. But anyways, 100% S tier character. And next up is Shield Knight. Shield Knight is like a better version of Polar Knight. Imagine a universe where you can play as Polar Knight, but instead of just freezing a chain after killing an enemy, you can just kill the whole chain and then get a lasting benefit from that chain. That is a long-winded way of saying that I think the shield mechanic is better than the freezing in terms of rewarding the player for cleverly using enemy placement to their advantage. Honestly, more enjoyable than I expected her to be. And for that, I could see the bottom of A tier, so pretty high up. That being said, the next character on the list is Mona. My opinion on Mona has declined a bit, because I think that the potion explosion is not as good or even as fun as I once thought it was. I still think it's useful, and it's definitely decent early game or when you don't have good items, but I think generally it does kind of fall off later on. That being said, I still think it is a fine ability, and getting more potions as well is, you know, it's a nice bonus. That being said, I think a nice simple upper B tier is correct for this character. Next up is, of course, you know, the new content.
Ooh, new content? What does that mean, new content?
This is actually the first time ever that I've played Chester, and honestly, pretty fun. I mean, it's literally just cheaper relics, and I guess you can have more relics, but so far that hasn't been a problem for me, so it's kind of a non-issue. But cheaper relics is cool, and honestly, I like being able to just teleport to the shop. It's convenient, and it looks nice. I like the way that Chester looks, kind of like Propeller Knight. I just like his animations and his portraits, so I think he's cool overall. It is a very simple ability, which is honestly fun, right? Because relics are fun, so being able to just get a bunch of items and stockpile them high till they're rarer than a diamond, I think is a compelling character. And for that, unironically, I think he goes in A tier. So, next up is the Enchantress. Pretty mediocre. At first I was like, okay, it's just damage, but more of it. And yeah, kind of. Damage on all sides. 2 damage for 2 HP. Quadruple the area. Which, yeah, that's true. That is technically the case, but really was not compelled with this character. I mean, I think she's fine, and I think you can definitely do some stuff with her ability, but honestly, do not have too much to say for her, because I just didn't really enjoy her ability that much. I forgot to say this earlier, but C tier. But that's okay, because we're at the end of the non-refracted characters, kind of, sort of, for the most part. But before we continue on to the refracted characters, of course we have to talk about Random Knight and Shuffle Knight. How do they fare in this tier list? Well, let me tell you. Random Knight, easy S tier. You can play as any character. Shuffle Knight, D tier. You cannot play as any character. The secret and miscellaneous characters are going to be ranked after all of the refracted characters are finished, so at the pretty much very end of the video. With that being said, not that much to report on. This is pretty much the halfway point for me and probably for you, so yeah, how's it going, chat? I can't imagine you're just watching this as like your main video. This is definitely a second monitor video, but that's okay. Sorry for repeating words. I feel like I keep repeating the words like literally and cool and honestly and words like that. I feel like I'm repeating them constantly. I don't I don't really know what to do about that. I'm sorry, man. Anyways, back to our regularly scheduled programming. Starting, of course, with Refracted Shovel Knight. Alright, it's time for alright, it's time for Refracted okay, it's time for Refracted Shovel Knight. Refracted Shovel Knight was actually, pretty fun. He was fun the first time, he's fun this time. Not much changed in my opinion of him. I think doesn't take too much thought to play him, but he's pretty satisfying to play. You know what I mean? Like that, +1 damage that he gets is very satisfying to use, especially in that flying place that I always forget the name of. Flying machine. Very cool. And there's some like niche other cases, because the way he moves is so different from every other character in the game with his ability that, you know, it gets you in some interesting scenarios. And overall, I think definitely an A tier character. Also, can we talk about how I teleported into the spikes? Like, yeah, why did I do that? But also, you can do that with normal spikes, but not the Scrub Knight spikes? That's kind of stupid. Game developers, please fix this in the next patch notes. Thank you. That being said, the next character is King Knight. I was going to turn on randomized locations, but instead I accidentally turned on infinite lives instead. Don't ask me how I mixed those up. Don't worry, I didn't die because I'm awesome. I also finally remembered to turn off cutscenes after literally 20 characters. Anyways, King Knight, Refracted King Knight. I like him a lot. I think he's got a lot going for him. I think the fact that his ability is reliant on the enemies you're chaining not only incentivizes chaining, but also just incentivizes you to experiment a little bit and be a little bit more active with your gameplay. King Knight, to an extent, is just kind of like Enchantress, where it's just damage but more of it, right? You just can do a lot of damage in a specific location very easily. Pretty powerful character, I would argue, but still a lot of fun, I'd say. And it's cool that pretty much every enemy in the game and entities too, like potions, keys, bosses, blocks, everything, all have different Joustus cards. That definitely adds to the enjoyment. And because of that, man, yeah, I could certainly see the top of A tier, at least for now. Maybe even S tier, but top of A tier for now. And next up on my big list of characters is Refracted Spectre Knight. Is it just me, or was Refracted Spectre Knight genetically engineered for the pocket portal item to, like, be better? That being said, I actually think this character is more fun than I gave them credit for in the past. To the point where I would either give them top of B tier or bottom of A. I'd say without Pocket Portal, probably top of B tier. Yeah, I really enjoyed Refracted Spectre Knight. They can just like flat avoid damage a lot of the time. You get really easy damage on chains, like a lot of double damage on chains, so you're just taking a lot less damage in general. But it still feels like kind of aggressive, which is, I feel, the heart of Spectre Knight play. Overall, fun character. So yeah, top of B tier. Next up is, of course, Refracted Plague Knight. Like a lot of other characters, Refracted Plague Knight is better than I originally gave them credit for, because that jump has utility that I had not originally thought about, that I realize now does exist. The 2 extra damage that you can get from a charge jump is a bonus. It's not really main ability in my opinion. It's just something to tack on, a cherry on top, right? It's okay, you know, it can get the job done, but you're really there for just the jump ability. And it's good, it can get you out of situations, but it's also extremely niche and very limited, so I think the best I can do for this character is somewhere in B tier. That being said, next up is Mole Knight. I am happy to say that Refracted Mole Knight is getting a much higher ranking than he previously did. Despite the fact that he is very different from pretty much every other character in the game, he's also fun. You kind of have to play him completely differently than any other character. But they're still pretty powerful. Like, they have a couple genuine setbacks, but I would still put them pretty high on a, like, power tier list, like a power scaling thing, right? And they're just such a unique experience very fun to play experience that I would put at the bottom of A tier. Also, this is the character that I used to get the kill 50 enemies in one action achievement. I deleted the footage for that, but just trust me, what you want to do is go to the plains biome and then literally just kill as many things that aren't beetles as you can. Alright? All you have to know is that you can have 14 tiles in total on the entire board that are not beetles, and then all of the other beetles on the board have to be connected, and then you will have 50. That is a 50 chain. It is slightly annoying, but definitely possible. So, bottom of A tier. Next up is Refracted Treasure. Refracted Treasure Knight is like Prism Knight, but better. They are the peak of utility characters. They have very good movement, being able to instantly zip from one side of the board to the other. They can move large hordes of enemies in one turn. Not to mention, they look cool. Like, they have a grappling anchor. That's cool. That's a cool thing to have. I feel like this character, you can use them in any level for any reason, right? They're not a like, the ability is not a necessity, but it will pretty much always make your life easier in any given situation. And for that, like, general utility, I think that they deserve a high A tier, and perhaps in another life in S tier. The next character on the list is, of course, Refracted Tinker Knight. Ignoring the fact that I was simply not capable of getting the true ending on my first run, Tinker Knight, Refracted Tinker Knight, the second time round was surprisingly entertaining of a character. The gear works sort of like a separate entity, but also an extension of you, obviously, where you can kind of ride on it, and while you're on it, it takes damage instead of you, right? So it's mainly to tank hits, but also allows you to damage hordes of enemies extremely easily. Just very interesting ability. Like, I don't know how else to phrase it. I think it's very good in levels. It falls off a little in bosses, but sometimes you can find some downtime to hit them with your gear ability, and that by itself can be a little bit fun. It has a lot of like niche utility, such as allowing you to travel over puddles of like poison or lava or ice without taking any damage. You can jump off of the gear while you're on it by pressing the ability button again, which means that you can kind of jump out of an area if you're surrounded, but there's a free space around you. And I think overall this character has a decent amount of depth, but is also just very fun to play, has a lot to offer. And because I don't have any refracted characters in S tier so far, you know, I think that Tinker Knight certainly takes the cake. So I'm going to put them in S tier. A round of applause, of course. The next character is Refracted Polar Knight. Refracted Polar Knight, don't look at that. Refracted Polar Knight is kind of like Refracted Tinker Knight if they required much less thought to actually use. Because while Tinker Knight has less HP and a mechanic that requires you to actually think about what you're doing, Polar Knight does not have that, because the wolves just go in kind of whatever direction they please, and they're really easy to refill, and you have a normal amount of starting health. Like, there's literally a run on YouTube. It's one of like the first results when you search up Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon. That's like an actual gameplay video of a guy that just never gets hit because he only uses the wolves to beat the entire game. Like, kind of a busted character. So they're fun, right? They're a fun character, but in a completely different way than Refracted Tinker Knight. But like, I gotta acknowledge that it is a fun character, and for that, I'm putting them like low A tier. I can't really put them higher than that because there's nothing else to it, you know what I mean? There's no nuance here, I would say. But low A tier works pretty well. Next up on the list is, I actually legitimately have to open the game. My computer was like completely messed up yesterday, and I had to reset everything. It was really extremely annoying. Next character is Refracted Propeller. I think I've grown to enjoy Refracted Propeller Knight more than I used to by a wide margin, because their corkscrew kick, cool name I guess, works very seamlessly with your normal moveset in a way where it almost just enhances what you already have, and it's pretty fun to use. I mean, it's kind of like a temporary spear, like an extra damage spear attack, and like it can definitely knock off big groups very easily. And I think it's not the strongest ability, right? I don't think they're the strongest character, but their ability feels very rewarding still, right? Feels like everything works together to make a good experience. And because of that, I would honestly put Propeller Knight in somewhere in A tier probably. The next character on the list is, of course, Refracted Scrap Knight, the infamous. Is Refracted Scrap Knight poo-poo garbage character? Not really. But do they have a lot going for them? I would argue against it. I enjoy Refracted Scrap Knight more than I did the last time I played them, as for almost every other character on the tier list. But that doesn't mean that I enjoy them that much more than other characters on this tier list. My opinion has not changed that much. I still think that their ability is perhaps too complex or hard to use. I can't really put my finger on it, but it just feels like there's not that much utility. On the one hand, there's the movement aspect. You throw your bag, you teleport to your bag. Refracted Plague Knight does that better. Hell, Refracted Propeller Knight does that better. Prism Knight does that better. Pretty much any character in the game does the movement aspect better than Refracted Scrap Knight does, at least in terms of how fun or how useful they are. In terms of enemy movement, you know, that other utility, I mean, Puzzle Knight does it better, Prism Knight does it better. I'd say anyone does it better just because it's so unorthodox that it's almost just difficult to use with not that much upside. And I feel like I'm missing something. Not to say that there's no utility in Refracted Scrap Knight, but Refracted Scrap Knight I feel like is only useful if you just, you know, every once in a while sprinkle their ability, and you can't use it a lot. You have to use it when it's, you know, somewhat useful. And it's still not nearly as satisfying as other abilities to use when it does have a use case. You know, it feels like another character probably could have done that better. Yapping aside, I think that Refracted Scrap Knight probably has to go in C tier, as they, you know, did in the past. Next up on the list is the other infamous, known as Refracted Prism Knight. Whereas I think that Refracted Scrap Knight does have a purpose that every once in a while can come to fruition, I think that Refracted Prism Knight is a little bit different. I feel like even less so are there situations where you really want to make a clone. A lot of the time I would make a clone just because I felt like I should, because, you know, I'm making a video where I rank everyone's powers, and if I don't use a power, then I'm not really ranking the power, right? I feel like I didn't really gain that much from it. Every once in a while, you know, you can do like a cool strategy with it, but it honestly feels not that good to play with, you know? And what's funny is I'm sure that there's literally like some guy, I mean, maybe not, there's not that many people playing this game, but there might be like one guy out there that really enjoys Refracted Prism Knight, and if that's you, then speak up, man, or ma'am, because I really respect that. But for me, it's gonna be another C tier, probably, which is unfortunate. Next up on the list, though, is Refracted Puzzle. Refracted Puzzle Knight is like Puzzle Knight if he was slightly better. That's it. I have almost nothing to say about this character. It is so straightforward. It is literally just enemy movement, but cool. Imagine if you were moving an enemy, but it was cool. That's what this character is. So, like, B tier, but higher than Puzzle Knight. Anyways, next character is Refracted Black. I like Refracted Black Knight. Not an insane amount. I think that the raw damage of the meteor, I mean, it's pretty lacking, right? But the range is alright, and it can definitely get you out of some situations, and I don't know, it feels rewarding. You know, it feels like you killed a lot of enemies quickly, you get some extra damage. I like that. However, there's no sense of scaling like Black Knight, and there's no sense of danger like Black Knight, because you have normal amount of HP now, but your ability it has a lot less potential. Black Knight has the potential to, like, literally one-hit kill a boss if you're goated enough. Well, Refracted Black Knight, you know, it's pretty stagnant. And, you know, I mean, regular Black Knight is steep competition, so I'm not blaming Refracted Black Knight. All I'm saying is that they're probably gonna go in, honestly, B tier. I was gonna say A tier, but you really don't use their ability that much in a run, and I think that's fine. I think they're fun, but not that fun, so B tier. That being said, the next character on the list is Refracted Shield. Refracted Shield Knight is very nice, very fluid to play. Especially in boss fights. Boss fights are almost always just hitting the boss and chasing them till you run out of HP, and then you have to go take some potions, and then you just keep wailing on them, basically. And, you know, it's kind of the weakest part of the game. I still enjoy them, but not nearly as much, right? Shield Knight kind of fixes that issue by just having something to always be doing. You have to throw the shield at the boss, and then chase the shield, and the shield's always at a different location. The shield gives you invincibility, and it's just a much more dynamic boss fight. It also makes for more dynamic levels, where you're always powerful. Right? There's always this sense of power, but it never feels like you can just run into the enemies, you know what I mean? Like, unless you have really good items, obviously. You still have to properly engage with the level, you know, because you always have to keep picking up that shield and chasing it and, you know, killing enemies when you have that invincibility for faster chains and stuff like that. And I really like that. So I'm torn between S and A tier. I've decided, after a little while, that Shield Knight is in fact an S tier character. Because they're just like a jack of all trades, you know, they're just always fun to play. Next character, of course, is Refracted Mona. Mona's pretty middle of the road for me right now. I think the potions serve their function pretty well. They're alright projectiles, do decent damage, they chain, which is really nice. They're somewhat easy to fuel. I think it's kind of annoying to have to manually heal, but obviously it's not a big deal. I just think that, with my current understanding, just having a damaging projectile with no super big gimmick or interesting use case, you know, it doesn't rank very high for me, but I would still say a high B tier, right? Still more fun than some characters, but doesn't have that much to stand out. And I've also rearranged the tier list a little bit so that both Plague Knights and both Monas are together, kind of. Like, you'll see. It's pretty funny. I like that. Anyways, the next character on the list is Refracted Chester. Chester is pretty awesome. I'm a little bit biased because I got Diamond Dust almost immediately from the very first shrine. Extremely powerful. But having that pocket item, and also, of course, enhanced item durability, is very good. It reminds me a little bit of Scrap Knight, actually, if they just streamlined it towards specifically items instead of being a little more general use. And I don't know, I think it works really well. The extra chest, it's nice, you know, I think it's just like a few abilities that work together to just make a generally very powerful feeling experience, because items are generally pretty powerful. And if you like that more off the cuff winging it kind of feeling more than those permanent relics, but you know, you don't want them to last like a super short period of time, you still want the items to last a while, I think Chester's really good for that. But yeah, this was a pretty easy run for the most part, and I quite enjoyed it, so I would honestly put Chester in high A tier. Next up is Refracted Enchantress. Refracted Enchantress is certainly a character that you can play, and they have an ability that exists. That being said, it's not very interesting. It's not even a bad ability, it's just so boring. It's literally just a better version of your main attack. Obviously there's a little bit of nuance later on, but for a majority of the game you're just gonna be shooting people. And I think it's fun. It's more fun than not having anything, but it also could be a whole lot more interesting, and for that I think I can put Enchantress at the top of B tier, just because it is a good ability. It does a lot of damage, and it's very easy to use, but it's so boring. You know what I mean? Like, it's not getting any style points, so it can't really go into A tier, S tier, because I don't personally vibe with the character that much, but I do find their ability fairly fun. Next on the list is, Refracted Shuffle Knight. How am I gonna do that? Because I didn't actually. Hey guys, it's me, Spectre Knight from the video game Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon, and I'm here to discuss Refracted Shuffle Knight, because my buddy Ness doesn't really think of the Random Knight and Shuffle Knight as real characters, but they're real characters. We're all big friends with them here in the Pocket Dungeon. So Refracted Shuffle Knight is pretty fun, because you gotta really you're always on your toes, and you never know what character you're gonna get, you know. And that randomness is the spice of life, you know. So I'm thinking that a Refracted Shuffle Knight is pretty fun, and I think that he should be in the top of A tier or something, like around there. Okay. I'm also here to talk about Donovan. That's me. I'm Donovan. Because my buddy also doesn't want to talk about that character, because I don't know. I think he just doesn't like me very much, guys. He didn't even put me past B tier. That's like, I don't even know why I'm doing the voiceover for this guy, but Donovan, I think if Ness was here, he'd probably put the guy in probably C tier. I don't think he likes me back then very much, because he's not that interesting of a character, and his single target damage is kind of boring and lacks any range. And so alright guys, Spectre Knight out. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Spinwolf is acquired by playing Refracted Polar Knight in the hub area and then throwing your wolf into Percy's cannon. In terms of a legitimate ranking, Spinwolf is an easy and very strong A tier. Double the damage, double the movement, double the fun. It's as simple as that. You go very fast, you kill things quickly, and relics are much more powerful than they would usually be because you're already so powerful playing Spinwolf. That's literally it, that's all I have to say. Schmutz is obtained by entering Puzzle Knight's secret hideout and then entering the seed Schmutz, which is like someone's cat or something. Schmutz is just as powerful as Spinwolf, if not more powerful, but much more thoughtful. I didn't even use their jump ability once, and I still had a lot of fun just using their main attacking method. It's very unique and very powerful, and essentially means that you won't actually be taking that much damage throughout a run, but you still have to think about who you're attacking and when. And for that, I would argue that Schmutz is an S tier character. It's on to the final character, the delicious last course, if you will. Quandary Sage is unlocked by completing all 4 quandaries with any character, and then after unlocking the new marathon mode, getting to wave 100 with any character. Quandary Sage is physically incapable of picking up relics, however always has a permanent spear ability. The spear is a very interesting choice for a permanent item because it allows for interesting shenanigans that require more skill-based gameplay for higher damage. It also pairs quite well with other items like swords and axes to easily kill large groups of enemies. F tier. That's the end of the video. It took longer than it should have because I'm really bad at actually being productive on a day-to-day basis, but it's finished. I think it's alright. Here's an actual tier list. This is the final tier list of the entire video. Really, I just hope that you enjoyed, even as like background noise or anything like that. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them. If you have any suggestions, that'd be awesome. In terms of how I can make better videos, or in terms of what videos you want me to make. I have some ideas right now, like a relic tier list, or ranking every character's best like color palettes. So that's probably what I'll work on at some point in the future. But yeah, I mean, your support will motivate me to work faster, basically. So if that's any incentive for you. That being said, I hope you enjoyed, and go on to go do something else now, man. Go make a difference.